Hello and welcome to Bastion and Broadcasting, where tonight we are doing another read through. And this will be like the second week in a row when I'm reading through a different RPG, which is something that I have done a little bit before, but the last couple of times I've done it, people have said that they found it really useful. So I decided to do another one. And what I wanted to do, first of all, before I go into what the game is, I want to make it clear that these are not intended to be reviews. I think I'm only really interested in talking about games in this level of detail if I think the game has something of value. So the idea of doing it as a review is not especially interesting. I don't think it's not really my area to review other people's games. But with that out of the way, the game that we're going to be looking at is probably one that you're already familiar with, and it is Mothership by Tuesday Night Games. Now, I've written some stuff about Mothership before. I've spoken about Mothership before. I've never done an actual read through all the way. And like I said, this isn't going to be a review, but I also didn't want it to just be a straight read through where we go cover to cover and I kind of explain the game. I wanted it to have a bit more of a focus than that. And today I was writing a blog post about games that sort of leap off the page. So I'm not going to repeat the whole blog post because that's available on bastionland.com. But the game, the topic that I spoke about in the blog and what I wanted to think about tonight is this idea that it started with reading a quote. It was a little quote that was from someone that was talking at a keynote speech at some seminar about professional wargaming, like wargaming used for military training. So it's not really like related. It's related to RPGs, but a different sort of game completely. But the quote that I really liked, which I've sort of paraphrased to fit, is the game exists in our heads. The rules only exist to get it there. And what I liked about that idea was it stresses the importance of the sort of the things that happen outside of the rules, and this idea that, you know, sometimes you can sit down, you can play an RPG and feels like you've hardly touched the rules, but you've had a great time. But but the rules exist to make that happen still. So it's an interesting kind of thought. I'll go into it a lot in the blog post, so I'm not going to repeat all that. But I wanted to look through Mothership now as a bit of a case study in a game that I think gets into your head really well. The sort of opposite would be, I'm sure we've all bought RPG books, especially like a new system, where we've read through it and we've thought, oh yeah, this system seems pretty clever. It seems pretty good. It's got some good rules, and the setting looks okay. And then you just can't get excited to run it, and you can't. It doesn't leap off the page. It kind of stays in the book, and it might be a book that you go back to occasionally, but it doesn't sort of take on a life of its own. Mothership, as soon as I bought this game, which I bought it at a Dragon Meet. It must have been 3 years ago. It was whichever year it came out. So I think 3 years ago, let's say. Maybe even more. And I picked it up alongside Dead Planet, which is the first adventure that was released for it, which we'll be talking about a little bit as well. And the thing that struck me about this game, I kind of bought it because I'd heard a lot of cool stuff about it, and I'd seen that it had some really cool graphic design. I didn't know much about the system, or I didn't know much about Tuesday Night Games or Sean McCoy, to be honest, at the time. So I picked it up as something cool to look through. And then as soon as I started reading through it, it almost immediately made me want to like try it out at the table. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for why that happens here, whereas other books might sit on the shelf. So the things that we're looking for, really, there's kind of, I will get to reading through. I know that I'm leading this in a little bit, but there's three things that I'm looking for. I'm looking for things that awaken your imagination, things that get you thinking about running the game and get you excited. And lots of games have them. But I'm also looking for specificity and focus, because getting that first game of a new system going can be quite tough. There can be a bit of inertia there to sort of get it moving. So having like a real specific tone means that you can kind of pick up a game and run it, and you've got a kind of tone in mind already. You're not having to work with a very generic system. So specificity helps there as well. And also being able to bring unexpected things to the table. Another quote that I got out of the same wargame book was, "No person is capable of imagining something that would never have occurred to them." And I spoke about that a little bit more in the blog post as well. But again, I think in terms of leaping off the page and getting into your head, a game that kind of brings those ideas and suggests things that you wouldn't have thought of yourself. You know, if you're reading a game and it's talking about orcs and elves and dwarves and it's all stuff that you've read 1,000 times before, that doesn't necessarily leap off the page in the same way. Right, let's get to it. Let's actually do some reading. So I said this wasn't a review, but I am going to slightly jump the gun and say, if this were a review, I would say that if you have not bought Mothership already, and I'm interested to hear in the chat if there's anybody who has perhaps bought either Into the Odd or Electric Bastion Land and has not bought Mothership, because I feel like the Venn diagram must be like, there must be like a lot of crossover, just because Mothership has been like such a huge sensation in the sort of the same areas of the scene that I operate within. So I'm assuming everyone has already got Mothership, but if you have not got Mothership, my official review is that you should definitely buy the Mothership core book, and you should definitely buy pretty much any of the adventures, really. I mean, I got Dead Planet, which I think is a good one, actually. I think I have looked at the others, and they all do something different, but I feel like Mothership and Dead Planet is still such a solid like pair. And you know, they're small, they're cheap. I would say I bought them at a convention, and I would say they are a perfect like convention purchase, because they fit in your bag and they don't take up too much space. And when you're all dazed from being at a convention, they've just got nice layout to look through. And then when you actually get to look at them later properly, they actually back it up with actual content as well. So that's my review. Go and buy Mothership. With that out of the way, let's look at what this game does. Now, I've said that I'm not going to talk through the system. If you are not familiar with it, it is a percentile system, which means generally you're going to have a number between 1 and 100. And then you're going to roll a D100 and try and get under that number. And that number is a product of various scores tied to your character, and skills can improve that as well. So the system is, solid. And the point that I'm trying to make with this whole exercise is I'm not trying to diminish the system here, but I think even if Mothership had a completely different core system, I think the things that have made Mothership so successful, and I mean successful in terms of it's been popular, but also it's been successful because people have been actually playing it. And it's one thing to have a successful game that sells lots of copies and people talk about it being great and then forget about it. But this game has just gone on, and it seems to have it's been a successful game in that people are bringing it to the table and having a great time with it. And people are still making stuff for it years later. So I think there's no way of me saying this without sounding like it's a dig, but it's really not. But I think the system is kind of almost a small part of that, like the actual percentile system. Instead, I think you've got lots of things that make it stand out. The graphic design is one of them. But I looked through this a little bit today, and I thought, which bit is the first bit that makes this game leap off the page? And you got lots of mechanical explanation here, and that's all fine. I think by this point reading through, I was probably thinking yeah, okay, this is fine. And then I think the first, I'm going to come back to that table later because that does reappear later. Page 8. the first thing that kind of help this game leap off the page to me is this little table down here. And it might not look like much. It's just a D10 table that says what job are you going to do. So it might be that you're escorting passengers. But this is kind of the start of a snowballing effect where you've got these little tables that inform you about the world and kind of make, like I said, it's about making the game happen. And this little table helps make the game happen because it gives you a starting point straight away. And then on the next page, we have this little beauty, this hit location table. And again, this was a bit that really, I remember reading this page. I'm probably romanticizing this by saying that I was on the train traveling back from the convention. I think I may have just been in one of the convention halls reading this. And when I see hit locations, certainly back then, my first instinct was, oh shit, this is some kind of like super crunchy system, like, you know, Warhammer Fantasy roleplay where you're rolling specific body parts and you're having to track like armor across your whole body and things like that. And I thought, oh, I didn't realize this was like a crunchy system. That isn't really what I wanted. But instead, it says it's not usually necessary, but if it becomes important, you can use the diagram below to see where a character was hit. Rolling evens means it was their left. Rolling odds mean it was their right. So it's a tool. And this is what I was talking about when I talk about these kind of bringing unexpected things to the table. Because, you know, the GM on the one end of the spectrum, you've got the system where you could just say the game tells you that you take 5 damage and the GM interprets that as, okay, your arm is hit. At the other end of the scale, you've got something like Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, or like, I guess like RuneQuest had this, I think, and lots of games that have hit locations and very specific combat effects for like different body parts, and it's all very mechanized. And you know, the rules of the system will spit out the result saying you are hit in the arm for 6 damage. But what I like about this is it's in that nice middle ground where it gives you the freedom to, when it matters, you can ask the game to interject and say, okay, well, this thing is spitting acid at you and it does matter where you are going to get hit. So roll for it. Whereas if you're just kind of caught in an explosion, you could think, well, you know, your whole body is thrown around, so it's not that relevant. And it feels, I don't know, I haven't yet fully worked out how to explain it, but it feels like something that I can imagine using at the table. That's my best way of describing it. Whereas when I look at some of these more complex, like hit location tables, it feels like something that it's going to slow my game down, because I'm going to have to stop the game and say, right, okay, so you've hit the enemy, right, let's stop and get the chart out and see where you hit. So yeah, I like that for that reason. And you've also got like a, you know, recovery from unconsciousness table, which is good. And then following on from that kind of philosophy behind the hit location thing, where it's almost a phrase that I've used is when I'm talking about ammunition or food or like any kind of supplies, my kind of rule of thumb is it doesn't matter unless it does, which isn't very helpful, but that's what I would say to myself to remind myself. But what I mean by that is kind of summed up here. So it says down here, a note on bookkeeping. I'm gonna have to zoom in because this is pretty tiny. So most people hate tracking ammunition. Ultimately, it's up to the warden whether you track ammo or not. But for survival-oriented games, we recommend it. It's not so much about being realistic as it is that running out of ammo leads to all sorts of interesting play, where players have to seek out new weapons and ammo, improvise weapons from found objects, or even tinker with their weapons to use ammo they do find. Now, I like that a lot, and that sums up what I was trying to say about food and stuff when I'm running a game. My philosophy is that most of the time, I don't care about how many rations you've got, but if we are playing a game where you are traveling through the wilderness with limited supplies, or rather limited access to supplies, then having that system be in there will create interesting play, as Sean calls it here. And again, that's to get back to our third point. It's the game interjecting something interesting rather than just having a rule there because it's the realistic thing. You know, he outright says this isn't about realism. This is about creating interesting situations. The real horror story version of that is that I almost had weapon breakage in Electric Bastionland. Because I had the same kind of logic. I thought, well, yeah, when your weapons break, it's fun because now you have to go and find an improvised weapon. But I think it would have just driven people absolutely bonkers to actually have to deal with that in play. So it didn't make the cuts. But if you want to house rule that in, then you're revising the original author intent there. And then this page. I'm going to let you soak that in while I drink my coffee. Now, a lot has been said about equipment lists in role-playing games and how an equipment list can get you excited and it can tell you about the setting. And there is definitely some of that here. But I've seen games that have pictures of guns with the rules next to them. And, you know, that it reminds me of like the old Warhammer 40k rule books that always had those like 2D side profile pictures of the weapons, and you know that always had a certain cool factor to it. But what we've got here has gone like a step further. Like, and I'm not going to point out all the cool little details, but there's lots of cool little details about the weapons here. And this was when I was showing people Mothership on that day when I bought it at a convention, I remember going to this page and saying like, yeah, look at this. This is what's cool about this game. And it just somehow, it's going to sound really pretentious, but it's like it's merged the rules and the kind of almost like a sense of tactility to these weapons. Like you can look at this this rigging gun with the harpoon, and you can kind of almost like feel the weight of it looking at it because it's got this kind of chunky art style, and you can see the rules here, you know, 2d10, and that could have just been a table, but instead it feels like you're looking over it. It makes it feel like it somehow makes it feel more real, and I don't even mean that in the sense that I feel like immersed in the setting. It does help with that, but it also makes it feel like something I could run. It gets me thinking about running the game somehow. It's a really cool effect. And the armor is kind of the same deal, where you've got, it's not just like a picture and some text, they're more like intertwined, which I think just helps it feel like something you could just pick up and use. And then we have got some cool equipment, but better than that, we've got these two tables, which are like the sort of iconic thing of Mothership now, I guess. When I think of creating a Mothership character, I do think of those like 4 classes, and we will get to that section. I do think of like the 4 character classes, but I also just think of these 2 tables. And the idea of not using these tables, like, I don't get why you wouldn't, but I think it's just awesome. You almost can't help but look at it and pick 2 and think, well, what does this tell me about my character? You've got mercenaries, and this is interesting because you've got kind of both sides of the coin here, where you've got the standard like table over here that tells you different mercenaries you could hire and what their skills are. And if this was just where it ended, this would be good. Like it would be solid. It would do the job. But you've got this as well. So you can hire these, you know, professional people, but then you've also got just these scum that you can hire. And I would kind of like, it kind of makes me want to not hire the professionals and just hire these scum, because they've all got their own little personalities and stuff. And again, it just makes you excited to want to run the game. And they get a motivation, which is always cool. Now, the stress system. This is quite a good example of a system where you would think, from what I've been saying about how the rules only exist to get the game into your head, that I would want like ultra minimalist rules, and I kind of do to some extent. But there is a place for these kind of more complex systems, like this whole stress, panic, resolve system that exists in Mothership. It's quite involved. It's quite mechanical and crunchy, but it does that thing that I said about how it brings something to the game that you're not just going to be able to get by improvising it. And it gives a specificity to the game as well, because it's the classic like Call of Cthulhu thing, where it kind of gives you a bit more of a structure, where if you tell people that you've got this kind of panic system in your game and this stress system, it kind of sets some expectations, and it makes that first session setting expectations, I think, a little bit easier, because you can see that these things are going to happen most likely. And then we've got a load of cool stuff about travel and so on. I spoke to Sean McCoy, the author of this game, about doing this read through, and I was really hoping he'd give me like some kind of scoop about what's coming next for Mothership. But I think it's fair to say that it's public knowledge now that there is going to be a Warden's Guide, which is like the GM's guide, I guess, and that's going to be really cool. So I'm very much looking forward to looking through that when that comes out. This is what I'm looking for, and this is probably like the most well-known page or spread from Mothership, because it's the character sheet, but it's also character creation. And I think part of the reason that this game appealed to me enough that it made me want to like almost run it straight away was this page. Now, character creation is relatively standard, really. You roll some effectively ability scores, some stats. You get some health. You pick from one of the 4 classes, and the classes are all really cool. I've spoken a lot about these, so I won't keep going on about it. But each of the classes has their kind of own effect that happens when they hit their panic limit, and it creates really interesting dynamics between the different character classes. But maybe I grew up with too many like maze books. But when you put this in front of me, I almost can't help but like start to fill it in my head, because my eye just wants to follow this line and like fill it in. And I remember again reading this book and sort of working through this flowchart and being like, yeah, so let's say I roll this, I'd put that there, and it almost tricks you into like making a character before you've even sat down to play the game. And yeah, it just gets you into, and same with these skills, like you're sort of looking over the skills and you might think, oh, well, I'd be interested in having a character that has robotics as a skill. So you kind of draw the line back, and it almost tricks you into thinking about your character again, even if you're not playing the game, which is really cool. And then we've got a nice cheat sheet. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about, and I'll leave it on this page because this is a really good example. Part of what I was talking about was the idea that you might buy a game and you might just find that it doesn't engage you enough to actually run it. And even if you like the game, even if you're interested in the game, it might be that when it comes to game night, you're like, okay, no, I'm just going to run something else because it's more engaging to me. And I think things like Mothership that have such clear design and so many little, calling it a trick sounds like I'm diminishing, but they are like little tricks throughout the book that sort of make the game leap into your head and leap off the page. Having those little tricks, because it means that it's going to make the game happen, it's you can't undervalue those, is what I'm trying to say. And an analogy that I liked was that I used to work as a teacher, a classroom teacher, many years ago, and obviously a huge amount of being able to teach children, especially I specialized in teaching children that perhaps didn't want to be there, and you have to sort of work very hard to engage those students, and you have to engagement is key. You have to make sure they're constantly engaged because they don't want to be there and they don't want to hear what you've got to say. So you've got to get them on board, and it gets easier as you build a relationship with them. But especially if you're for the first time you're teaching them or it's a brand new subject, you've got to bring out all the guns. Now, I since stopped teaching, and when I moved into a different career, I was going into training sessions for a subject that I was actually interested in. So this is when I was working in wine and spirits, and I was going to a course or a training session to do with wine or with spirits. So a topic that I'm very interested in, and I'd paid to go on this course, but I would be sitting there in this classroom effectively, and because I had worked as a teacher, I was watching the person delivering the training, and I would just be thinking, I'm not engaged at all, and this is a subject that I'm really interested in. I would come to this class even if it wasn't for work. You're telling me about something that I'm genuinely interested in, but I'm still getting distracted and I'm still not able to pay attention. I feel like I'm not learning. And I almost just wanted to say to them, look, just because you're teaching adults that have paid to be here and they are interested in the topic, you still have to make your lesson effectively engaging, because that's how brains work. They still need to be engaged. You can't just rely on the person to turn on their engagement switch. And it's the same with role-playing games. You can make the best game in the world in text, and you can think, I've designed this system, it's perfect, and I've written this brilliant setting. But you need to engage the reader, or else they're not going to. Some people will, but you're not. You're going to get people that just don't. It just won't leap off the page for them. So that's my rant about teaching, and I think Mothership is a good example of a game that does it right, because the game is good, and if the game was just released in plain text, I'm sure people would still enjoy it. But all these little engagement tricks, they make it into something bigger than what it would have been if that was the case. The other thing that's interesting about Mothership is not really like this book, because like I say, the sort of community around it is huge, and it launched with an adventure several years ago, and I'm not going to read all the way through this, but again, to give you an idea, there is a lot of very interesting, very cool design in here, designed to engage the reader with this adventure. And I'm sure you're thinking of lots of other games that do the same. Something like Muckborg is an extreme example. But thinking about how you expect somebody to absorb your game, how do you expect them to get your game from the book to the table? I think I've seen lots of games that don't think about that. And even, with Electric Bastionland, I wasn't doing fancy layout stuff like you see in these Mothership products. But the choice to have some white space and to have relatively sparse text and bullet points and things like that, and everything on a 2-page spread, there were decisions in there that were to make the game engaging to people and easy to absorb and easy to get from the book to the table. So that is my kind of look through Mothership. It was a tricky one because there's a lot that has already been said about Mothership, and I didn't want to just do another gushing review. I've gushed a little bit, but I feel like I've gushed about something quite specific. The thing that I forgot to mention at the start of this video is that this topic was chosen by my patrons. I've made some changes to my Patreon now, so all patrons receive all rewards. So if you do want to be able to vote on future videos, you can pledge at the lowest level and you'll get voting rights as well as access to all of the Patreon exclusive stuff. But that's at patreon.com/Bastionland. But yeah, we did a vote and Mothership won this week. And yeah, that's that. Now I had a feeling that I would run slightly short on this because Mothership is a nice short book and I've kind of said a lot about Mothership before. So we're doing a throwback to a previous thing that I tried. And this is like, going back to the teacher analogy. This is like when the teacher has obviously not planned enough work for the whole lesson, so you get to watch TV at the end of it. So we previously did something called Artificial Bastionland, which is, can this AI dungeon thing, can it run Electric Bastionland? And the answer was kind of no. Now the question today is, can it run Mothership? So I have inputted into, as our prompt for this game, I inputted the kind of synopsis, if you like, from Dead Planet, the iconic seminal Mothership adventure. So you are a teamster working aboard a long-distance spacecraft. Your ship was pulled from hyperspace and left drifting hopelessly around a strange planet with a tide-locked moon. You're floating in a vast graveyard of derelict craft, the closest of which scans as the Alexis, an archaeological research vessel. The ship's atmosphere is fine, but a scan reveals no signs of life and inexplicable power fluctuations. You look at your watch. It reads 4 a.m. There is still time to get off this dying spaceship before you all die of exposure or starvation. But if you don't, what will become of you? That last paragraph was generated by the AI, by the way. My prompt stopped here. So, what are we going to do? So, look around for any other crew that have survived. Let's get our party. Your ship is on its side. Already it's like the physics of space are falling apart. Lying in a massive field of debris. The hull has been torn open like an egg and the inside is filled with broken machinery. Yeah, okay. So let's shout out. Is anybody else alive? Let's do a double question mark. This is desperate time. There is no answer. The wind whistles ethereally amidst the maze of derelict craft. Somewhere something creaks and moans. You shout out again, is anybody alive? You are alone. So it seems, I was thinking like this wreckage was floating in space, but I'm guessing it's like on some body at least. Right, okay. Head toward the Alexis and look for an entrance to the ship. I'm guessing that it thinks the Alexis is like parked on this same planet as all this debris. You drop down through a hole in the ship and turn yourself around. The ship is filled with a thick layer of dust that makes you sneeze violently. Check your scanner for signs of weird shit. Your scanner beeps and a message appears in red letters. Go on, you can't leave me on that cliffhanger. Holographic projector. You shine your flashlight over the words and search for the hologram projector. You find a small device hooked to a console with a flashing red on button. Fine, obviously hit the on button. Let's give it a fair chance. A hologram of a beautiful woman appears in front of you. She appears to be human, dressed in a futuristic outfit. As you watch, she reaches out and turns the projector off. Okay. Has she turned herself off? That was close, she says in a pleasant voice. How in the world did you know how to turn that thing on? So she's like a holographic woman. I push the button and hope for the best, you say. Okay, let's ask. Okay. What happened here? My ship was pulled from hyperspace. And there are lots of weird power fluctuations coming from your ship. You realise that you've been shouting and ask her to repeat what she said. I said you should come inside and we can talk about what's going on, she repeats. Alright then. Okay, fine. Let's follow the holographic woman. I mean, if this was Mothership, then this would be like an evil hologram. The woman leads you through some corridors and into a comfortable lounge. There was a small fire crackling in the corner. My name's Jefferson, she says. What's our name? Someone give me like a space teamster name, and I will take the first option. Let's do something with the fire. Point your scanner at the fire and check for irregularities. Greg, thank you, Jay Waffles. We'll take that. Your scanner indicates that the fire is producing more carbon dioxide than a fire of a similar size should. It's a real fire, says Jefferson. I want to make you as comfortable as possible. Okay, right. My name's Greg, and back on my ship, I was responsible for fire maintenance. Let's see. Yeah, fire maintenance, fire safety, open fire cookery, you know, all the fire stuff. They used to call me Burning Greg. Interesting, said Jefferson. And now you're floating in space. Saves me the trouble of explaining. A door in the corner of the room slides open. This is my bedroom, she says. This is not... Come on, AI Dungeon. This is not what I was going for with my Mothership experience. Say, we should check for more survivors. Who else was on the crew? Yeah, this is the problem with AI Dungeon, is it's like always trying to be filthy, and like we have well, I'm assuming safe mode is on. It kind of starts with safe mode on, or rather it's on like a moderate safe mode, so you get like, you can do violence and all that nice stuff, but it's not gonna outright turn into like erotic fiction. But it does like to, you can almost feel when it's hitting that filter, which is, it's funny, but it's also kind of worrying. So I was alone on the ship, she says. This is my ship. I'm a pilot. Yeah. Alone on the ship, and she's a hologram? I mean, are you allowed to just say, why are you a hologram? Check her holographic projection unit with your scanner. My name is Greg, you say. My friends call me Burning Greg. Yeah, I didn't ask you to like repeat this awesome line. I'm a pilot, she says. I have a beautiful ship and a beautiful life. I am not lonely. The AI has gone. The AI is going down a weird kind of route here. So you can do a sort of story injection. So we're going to inject something from Dead Planet. So I'm going to say suddenly you hear an unnatural scream coming from the cargo hold. You clutch your head. What I'm even going to like check the table to see what some of these like weird effects are. It's been a while since I read through oh, you can get some nightmares. Yeah, I'll say just you clutch your head and horrific nightmares flash before your eyes. So we're going to turn this very tepid romantic story into a genuine sci-fi horror. You are overwhelmed by a sense of dread. Burning Greg, whispers the voice in your head. You will never be rid of me. A cold hand touches your shoulder and you scream. Now we're talking. So, what do we do with this cold hand? Grab the cold hand and try to bite it. If a cold hand ever touches me on the shoulder, I'm going for it. You turn around and find yourself face to face with a ghost, literally. Wow. Burning Greg, she whispers. I'll always be with you. Let's check. Use your scanner to check if this ghost is legit. Yeah. Literally. The holographic projector is large and complex, but you should be able to fix it. You start by removing the contorted face of a ghost that has been embedded in it for years. Right. Try banging at the inner workings of the holographic projector until the ghost disappears. You have a wrench in your hand. You should be able to just start tearing the thing apart. The ghost screams at you, "No, don't break my projector." I knew this was like a fake holographic ghost. Do some pretend Latin chanting while you bash at the holographic projector. The ghost screams as you smash up her projector, and several years' worth of images flash across the walls. I want to get this exorcism angle going on. Tell the ghost... Oh. Do a witty one-liner in Latin. What? Interfigimini. Suddenly the walls around you turn red. You scream as blood spurts from your eyes, ears and nose. You stagger around, hacking and coughing as blood fills your lungs. Okay, let's what now? Call out to Jefferson. Was that actually her name? Call out to Jefferson for help. Maybe she was good all along. What's going on? She screams. A ghost floats into the room. Thank you for freeing me from this prison, it whispers in your ear. Right, this place is terrible. Try to find an escape pod. I'm not going to do pretend Latin chanting because I'll probably accidentally say something awful in Latin. I know you lose connection there for a minute. I'm hoping that you can now hear me. I'm just going to carry on playing and assuming that you can. I made sure to not advance the gripping plot any further. Phew, we're back. Okay, yeah. So, check. Oh, hang on. Are we going to be... You know, I think I am going to have to reload the page. Okay, we're in. Okay. Check the pod for ghosts and other spooky stuff. We might be fine now. Couldn't leave that on a cliffhanger of that level. You peer through the window in the door of the escape pod. You can see a pale woman floating outside. She watches you, her eyes following you as you move around the pod. Is this like the same ghost? Check the pod for holy water, an anti-ghost ray, or anything like that. You find an icon of Saint Nikolai. It is encrusted with lapis lazuli and golden diamonds. This will protect us, you shout, kissing it. Whew. Thrust the icon toward the ghost and say something powerful. Begone, foul spirit. The icon glows brightly and the ghost screams. It groans horribly as it disappears into the mist of space. The atmosphere in the escape pod seems to become lighter. Great. Use the escape pod to get back to... Well, our ship was like wrecked, wasn't it? To head down to the planet. And I'm hoping this is going to give us a nice ending. Nice happy ending on this planet, which is probably fine. As you land on the planet, you discover that it's called Alderaan. Oh, come to think about it, his name was... It was you. Right, okay. Look around for any Death Stars or other planet-killing weapons. Planet-killing bases. There's probably no Death Stars around this time of year. The planet is covered in orange grass, purple flowers and green trees. There is a blue river off to the side, and beyond that you see a range of mountains. Great, so let's just say we settle down here for a new life. Oh, you decided to stay here. The planet is beautiful and there are kind people here. A girl with blonde hair approaches you. Hi, she said. I'm Leia. And is that not the real Mothership experience? Yeah, I don't think we can go any further than that. Ugh, thank you for watching tonight's stream. As always, you can find out more about everything at bastionland.com, where you can join the Bastionland Discord server. You can listen to the podcast, which I've just done the last episode of for a little while, and you can I'm too shocked by this finish. If you want to buy Mothership, if you just Google Mothership RPG, you'll find it. And again, I recommend picking it up. There will be a stream next week. The following week there will not be. So next week I'm going to do something, I don't know yet. We might do some kind of something slightly different. We've done a lot of RPG content lately, which is good. But I might tinker into something a little bit different next week. It's not going to be miniature wargaming. You can relax. But that's it for tonight. Thank you again for watching, and goodbye for now.